Hey everyone, Zam and the commander here. We are very, very excited to have Dr. Kenny Fent with us, and we're excited to promote the National Firefighter Registry. But before we do, we think that this episode requires a little bit of a backstory.
Yes, so it's been a wild couple months in what is pretty incredible timing. We actually recorded this back in March, only to then find out that through some federal program changes, the National Firefighter Registry essentially was paused. There were several layoffs that happened. And so at the time, we had to hold the podcast. And all because of, some big restructuring at the Department of Health and Human Services. But fortunately, the great news is that it is back. As of last week, the National Firefighter Registry is back online. So great news.
So today's podcast and episode is pertinent to today, and we really have a challenge to you, as I like to say, the Misfit Nation here for Better Every Shift. We need to double that number that has registered. And I guarantee that once you listen to Dr. Kenny Fent speak, you will understand why it's so important and how easy it is to register. So, with that, please listen to this episode and take action. If you're not registered through the Firefighter Cancer Registry, please do, because you're helping out the rest of the fire service.
This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is sponsored by the Fire Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting thefirestore.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzow. I am a fire officer. I am also an author here for Fire Rescue One. And, like it or not, I'm going to be your host as we talk to some very, very smart individuals in the fire service. And today is no exception. Dr. Kenny Fent is with us today, who's bringing up the IQ of the podcast a couple hundred points. But before we dig into everything, Doc, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here. Looking forward to just having a conversation, talking about our program, and really wanting to, raise awareness of cancer in the fire service and what we can do about it.
Well, it's definitely needed. The last couple of years, obviously, cancer has come to the forefront with just the epidemic level of people that it's affecting within the fire service. Before we dig into just kind of what your project and what you're working on with the National Fire Registry, you have a really unique background, and you're one of these people that I think need to be highlighted because of your dedication to helping us in the fire service through research, through a lot of hours of study and obviously then trying to transfer all that knowledge. I mean, you're the team lead for the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer at NIOSH. You've spent more than 15 years at NIOSH as a research industrial hygienist, where you've conducted research on firefighter health and safety. And a lot of your research is really focused on measuring and reducing our exposure to carcinogens. And again, at the present time, you're really focusing on growing this national registry, you'll hear sometimes, or the NFR, to become the largest, basically largest registry of firefighters in the United States. We got a lot to talk about with that, but I did want to start a little bit just to get into how did you get to where you are now? I mean, obviously, you're a very smart individual, except for the fact I know you're a Ohio State fan, but being from Wisconsin, we can oversee that because you're helping out the fire service. So, give us a little background on your journey.
Well, I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, so that's the other team that I root for.
Yeah.
And then I joined NIOSH, like you said, about 15 years ago. And I was in the health hazard evaluation program. And one of the first projects I had was investigating firefighters' exposures during vehicle fire responses. And actually, I was very interested in it, and excited to kind of take that on. And really, that was sort of the springboard that I jumped off of that really got me involved in the fire service. It was just one of those things that as you start to look at, firefighters and their exposures, there were more and more questions that had to be answered. And I really, count myself as very fortunate to be in the field that I am, to be able to work with firefighters, to be able to help where I can, to use my skills to be able to help. And, like you said, I've been doing this for 15 years, mainly looking at firefighters' exposures to carcinogens and what we can do about it.
So as you started to dig in 15 years ago, you started kind of like you said more on the automobile fires. Did you look at this and go, "Holy cow, this is really needed, number 1, and I can really make a difference if I can really start to step up this research?"
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with the car fires, it's one of those things where the field that I'm in, industrial hygiene, typically you're looking at one, maybe two chemicals that you're measuring for. You compare to exposure limits and you make recommendations. In the case of firefighters, we're talking about hundreds of chemicals. And so it was a real challenge just to be able to identify what chemicals we wanted to sample for, and then trying to make sense of the mixture of chemicals that we measured, and what can you do about it, really. Um, Firefighters have a lot of protective equipment, which is great, but they have to rely heavily on PPE, which means you have to
Use it.
have you have to use it, you have to have adequate training, you got to maintain it, all those things. And so, like I said, it's a complex environment that firefighters operate in. And it's not the easiest thing to control. Even when you do everything properly in terms of PPE, we're still finding exposures, and that's a lot of the research that I've done over the last decade or so has really looked at the absorption of these chemicals into the body, even when you're wearing all the proper PPE.
Yeah, and cleaning them, that's another topic we'll probably talk about a little bit too. Like at any point, did you ever call like some of your buddies that you graduated with and who are studying like I think you were saying before like you kind of research like, hey, they're working in a factory and this is where that chemical. It's usually one or
Right.
two. Have
Yeah.
you ever called them and said maybe I should have took a different route with this because this is a challenge, isn't it?
It is a challenge, but it's a challenge that I really enjoy. It's it's worth it. It's worth the extra effort to try to understand the exposures, and try to figure out what control interventions are effective, and what else we can do to protect the health and well-being of firefighters. So I really enjoy it. I'm glad that I landed in the area that I did, and we'll talk about the NFR, but I think that's really the next thing that we
Yeah.
can do to really help the fire service.
Yeah, let's dig into that. I mean, it's great. It's a great introduction. So, the National Firefighter Cancer Registry. I'm registered, by the way. And
Great.
if people are listening to this, and I had said on some previous programs when it comes to cancer, this is right. This is a no brainer because the we need data, right? We need data, and we need people to step up and say, "This is a problem. I'm going to try to help wherever I can." Give me the let's start way on the top. How did the registry come about, and then let's just keep breaking it down as we go.
Well, it had strong endorsement from all the major fire service organizations. I think they recognize that there's a lot more we don't know about firefighters' risk of cancer than what we do.
Hmm.
Um, and they advocated very strongly for the Firefighter Cancer Registry Act of 2018. That was signed by the president, created the law, which then created the Firefighter Registry, which NIOSH leads. And then, it's taken us a while to get up and running. We've been up and running now for a couple years. And, it's basically a registry, a voluntary registry of firefighters throughout the United States. And by collecting some basic information about firefighters and the work that they do, we're able to better understand workplace factors and how those relate to any cancer outcomes over time. And the way we do that is we're able to link to cancer diagnoses that are reported in all 50 states. So once a firefighter registers, they don't have to report a cancer outcome to us if they have one, and hopefully they don't. But if they do, they don't have to report it to us. We're able to capture that directly from the states. Um, but really tying that occupational piece, all that occupational information to those cancer outcomes allows us to really better understand how the occupation of firefighting relates to cancer risk, and what types of cancers are elevated and what factors are most associated with that increased risk, and what can we do about it.
Well, and I know firefighters, we like to think that we can multitask. So I'm going to challenge people listening right now to go to the registry and start registering as they're listening to this. How about that? Like if we can
Uh,
get an extra couple of thousand people to, it takes, how long does this take, Doc?
So, it takes only about 5 to 10 minutes to actually set up your account, sign the consent form, and create your user profile. Once you've created your user profile, we have at least enough information to be able to track any cancer diagnoses over time. And you'll actually get an NFR participant number at that point in time, too.
Okay.
So I agree with you. If you've been putting it off, don't put it off any longer. In 5 to 10 minutes, you can get signed up from that perspective. The enrollment questionnaire that asks questions about how long you've been a firefighter and where you've worked, and what kind of responses you've been to, that does take a bit longer. For some firefighters, up to 30 minutes. But the nice thing is you can log out and log back in as much as you want to complete that questionnaire.
Okay.
And like I said, you can get started in 5 to 10 minutes.
All right. So somebody's listening. We're going to give them the website right now, right? The best place to get information on it and the best place to sign up. Where do you,
NFR, nfr.cdc.gov.
okay. So nfr.cdc.gov will take you to the first page where you create your profile. Now, in the background, I'd be 100% honest. I clicked in. I had already registered and started all the questionnaires, but I think what Doc is saying here is just at least create your account because that helps us get started. If you don't want to go through all the questions at this point, you can come back to it, use the same login. So right now, I'm hoping thousands of people are going to nfr.cdc.gov. You're going to see, whether you've created an account or don't have an account, you have to give consent that you're 18 years old, that you're a firefighter. Click that link and get started. You'll use an email as a login, correct? And then it'll give you a participant number after a while. And I have mine right here. So as they go through, right, we'll talk a little slower as either firefighters. We have trouble multitasking, but I mean, why is this so important that we get this data?
Well, look, I mean, we know that firefighters have an increased risk of cancer. There have been a number of studies, including the largest study that was ever done in the United States was by NIOSH. That had 30,000 firefighters. That study has fed into a number of other research projects. Um, One of the most important here recently is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, which is really the world's governing body that looks at different carcinogens and whether they cause cancer or not. That committee, the IARC, as it's known, classified the occupation of firefighting as a known human carcinogen. This was just a couple years ago, and they found sufficient evidence of increased risk of mesothelioma and bladder cancer in firefighters, and then limited evidence for colon, prostate, testicular, melanoma of the skin, and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So that's 7 cancers that we have pretty strong evidence is related to the occupation of firefighting. But there's a whole bunch of questions that we don't have answers to. Those are 7 cancers out of about 40, 45 that we look at. So there could be other cancers out there that are also elevated in the fire service, and we just don't know. There we still don't fully understand what it is about firefighting that is leading to an increased risk of cancer. There may be different factors leading to different types of cancers.
Mhm.
So if we can start to understand better how the occupation of firefighting relates to specific types of cancer, that is enormously powerful information for the fire service to be able to implement policies and procedures to help reduce that risk of cancer. It's also really, really useful information for medical providers, public health officials to be able to, we could look at, for example, cancer screening guidelines. If we're finding certain types of cancers are hitting firefighters at younger ages, we might want to think about revised cancer screening guidelines. So there's all sorts of things that we can learn from this that actually will help the fire service be healthier, live longer, catch cancers at younger ages, and things like that.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the more power we get, I mean, the more numbers we get, the more likely we are to get more funding for this as well, right? Like
Sure.
the
Yeah.
the government, they in 2018 they started this registry with the intention of, okay, you guys, we're trying to help you. We need to help ourselves, right? Now, of course, there's people out there who go, I don't want them to have my information. Can we debunk that right now?
Well, so so the information we're collecting, the government already has this information.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So we're asking for your name, your address, the last four digits of your social. And that information is really just so we can be able to capture any cancer diagnoses from the states. But the government has this information. It's really just give us the permission to do these linkages. That's what we're doing.
Mhm.
And then give us a little bit more information about your work, and so that we have that work piece, and that's all we're doing at the end of the day. It's like really it's all about um, connecting the dots. We just need some information and permission to connect the dots and build a massive database that we can then use to benefit the fire service in the long run.
Okay. So you're saying the states already know. So when you are diagnosed with cancer in a state, that is, take us through that process just a little bit, kind of what that means.
Yeah, so in all 50 states, if you are ever diagnosed with cancer, God forbid, your cancer diagnosis is reported to the state, usually the state health department.
Hmm.
And so they have already a database of all the cancer diagnoses that have happened within that state. What they typically do not have is detailed occupational information. And a lot of times they don't even have any occupation information. So that's a real problem, because if we want to know how many firefighters are being diagnosed with cancer, the states aren't collecting the information we actually need to do that.
Okay. Okay.
But they are getting the cancer diagnoses. And so that's
Yes.
why I said you don't have to report it to us. We can get it from the states.
Okay.
Um,
And the state health departments are already recording that. So I want to make that really clear when people go, well, I don't want them to know my information. Well, what we're trying to do here is say, when you when if you are diagnosed, and I shouldn't say when, but right now the way the data is pointing to cancer, it's almost like, you know, a lot of firefighters are we're getting to that point, and that's another reason why this is so critical. If you are diagnosed, your state already reports that you're diagnosed with cancer. What the
correct.
registry is doing then is associating that cancer to firefighting,
Correct.
associating that to this occupation, which drives data to, hey, this is an occupational risk. And it also gets awareness to, we need to provide more funding, more research, and get more smart people like Dr. Fent on board to help us combat this, right? Like, I just want to emphasize that. Like, am I wrong at that?
100%. You've
100%. Okay.
characterized it well. Yeah.
So if I'm a true brother or sister of the fire service, hey, like, which we see all over the place of firefighters helping each other. This is the easiest freaking way to do it.
And unlike, and I mean, I have no problem. I've done tons of research on firefighters where we've collected blood and urine and all that kind of, all those kind of biological specimens. Unlike those studies, which are somewhat invasive, this is not invasive. This is, 30 minutes of your day, one day, and we've got the information. where we can kind of look at over time, the health outcomes in the fire service.
Okay, so hopefully now we got thousands of people that are doing it as we speak. So we're gonna still talk slowly, hopefully the servers can handle this. This would be great if you text me. You're like, dude, the servers are going down, which is not a possibility because it's built with a lot of robust background to handle what is where are we at right now and where do we want to be?
Yeah, so we're at right around 23,000 firefighters who have enrolled. That's over about 22 months. So we're averaging over 1,000 per month, which is great. If we get to, I think by the end of this calendar year, we should be over 30,000, which will surpass the largest study of firefighters in the United States. And our goal is to build the registry to 200,000. So we've got a long way to go to get there, but we're going to keep it open, so that firefighters, even brand new firefighters, even firefighters 2 years from now who join the fire service, will be able to enroll. So that's the goal. Keep it open, build the registry. The more firefighters who enroll, the more we can learn
Mhm.
about cancer and other health effects in the fire service.
Volunteer, on-call paid, career does not matter.
Does not matter. Retired firefighters are
Okay.
eligible. Wildland firefighters, all different types are eligible.
Awesome. Okay, good to know. So retirees that are listening to this, or those that are about to retire, get other retirees on board with this. Again, like it's not invasive as you were saying. It's data that, and I think I didn't realize the part about the states already reporting it. So if the states are already going to be doing it, like I said, it just it makes sense. Just join this registry, so it doesn't matter whatever state you're in. We're going to be associated to firefighting, which again drives data, funding, um, you name it, which leads to cures to all of this.
Yeah.
So all right. So I hammered that home a couple of times, but I know my brothers and sisters were kind of slow at certain things, especially when it comes to our own health. But take action, folks. At least get registered. Don't worry about the questions. If you only have like 5 or 10 minutes, at least get your name in there and then come back to them.
The Fire Store, equipping protectors with passion. Every decision we make as a company is about you, our customer. We wouldn't be where we are today without you, and we don't take that lightly. We understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need, when you need it, at prices you can afford. Visit us at thefirestore.com for everything but the truck, and shop our family of brands, including Streamlight, MSA, Lion, FLIR, and more. Now let's get back to the show.
So let's talk a little bit about cancer. Was it 2019 or what 2020 that it came out as firefighting is basically equivalent to like smoking? Is that kind of the same thing I'm hearing?
So in terms of smoking being a known carcinogen,
Yeah.
or diesel exhaust as a known carcinogen, the occupation of firefighting has been classified as a known human carcinogen. That was in 2022.
2022. Okay.
Yep.
So obviously we know our exposures are significant. And you've been studying this for the last 15 years. We started with automobiles. Obviously those have changed now with lithium ion batteries.
Correct.
Over the last like 4 or 5 years in research, what's the one thing that stands out to like, holy cow, like that maybe surprised you?
Well, I think you just mentioned it. So, the amount of new materials that are being produced, synthetic materials that are being produced in the world, not just in the United States,
Hmm.
that are now in our homes, businesses, cars, you name it. I always say, anytime you burn anything, you're going to produce carcinogens. So even campfires are going to produce some carcinogens, PAHs, formaldehyde, even benzene to some extent. But once you add all those synthetic materials into that fuel source, you're creating even more of a hazardous mixture of known carcinogens, halogenated substances, and um, the aldehydes, like I said, like just the PAHs, and including some of the PAHs that we know are really bad actors. those are all produced at a really high level when you have all those synthetic materials in that mixture. And now what's happening, and you see like out west, even on the East Coast now too,
Yeah.
with wildfires, and wildfires are encroaching upon our urban areas. And now it's not just a vegetation fire anymore. You've got all those structures and all those synthetic materials and cars and lithium ion batteries with all those metals. All of that is being released into the air where firefighters might inhale it or get it on their skin and absorb it into their bodies.
Yeah, your point about wildland fire too. It's you know, it used to be wildland. You didn't really have to worry about PPE for respiration too much, right? But now all of a sudden, that's come up in a lot of conversations. Like you were saying, is because if it burns one structure or one automobile, like the amount of chemicals that are now in the atmosphere and anywhere around that environment can cause cancer. I mean, and it. The other thing that I think is interesting is it's in firefighters, we think, okay, it's exposure over a long period of time, right? A couple of different fires over a couple of years. Are you finding that's different though? One or two big exposures can really lead to some real health issues.
I mean, I think still the cumulative exposure is the most critical in terms of cancer risk, but we really don't know to what the impact is of some of these really large incidents. um, you know, like like the wildfires out in Los Angeles that lasted weeks and weeks, and of
Hmm.
course, entire towns burned down, or the Lahaina fire in Maui, right? It's an urban conflagration. I can never say that word.
Yeah,
Um,
I always avoided it whenever. Yeah, yeah,
it's close enough,
yeah. Whatever.
but
Yes.
yeah. So we don't really know like major incidents like that. I mean, your exposures, even though it is over a short period of time, are so potentially so massive that it's certainly an area that we need more research. I mean, and that's one of those things actually. When you register for the NFR, we do ask about those major events and disaster responses because we are curious, like, is that contributing to your cancer risk in a disproportionately way?
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's just an area of more research. Of course, we know like with World Trade Center, I mean, that was one massive exposure. And we do know that they have an increased risk of cancer. So there is some evidence that even a single massive exposure can make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like every time we ask a question, right? It comes back to we just need this data. That's why this is so important. Um, and and obviously, the other part about the firefighter cancer registry is that there are ways to really motivate departments to do it. I know that there's some competition kind of between departments, or tell. Let's talk a little bit more about promoting the cancer registry and what kind of promotions you guys have and kind of ideas that you've been working on to promote it.
Yeah, so in that spirit of competition, that we all know that firefighters are a competitive bunch. We do have a new initiative called the Gold Helmet Department initiative or recognition. And so basically, the way it works is that any department, if they're able to achieve more than 50% of their active firefighters enroll, or if it's a large department, more than 300 of their active firefighters enroll. If they're able to achieve that, we recognize them as a Gold Helmet department. They get a web badge, they get a certificate, and we get to recognize them on our website as well.
Okay.
So right now we have a Gold Helmet web page that has an interactive map of the United States. And right now there are 28 dots on that map because we have 28 departments that have achieved gold helmet status so far. So
Yes.
it does seem to be percolating, and highly recommend, if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me or contact us, and we can tell you more about it.
Yeah, we'll leave the links into the show notes, and I just kind of looked a little bit right before we started, and Ohio is beating Wisconsin again in numbers, but we can hopefully boost those numbers up again with this. But right, like if get your whole department involved. I think it's cool that you guys are recognizing that. I'd like to see a little bit more state to state competition also.
Yeah.
Maybe as college football comes on, maybe we can give maybe we can get into that a little bit more. I know that you guys you have a good team behind you helping to promote it. I mean, you've been at some of the major conferences and some of the even the smaller conferences that I've spoke at. Is that still going to continue, and kind of what's the marketing and idea as you guys go forward?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a big presence at conferences up until now. We're certainly wanting to continue to do that as we're able. We have a big, communication campaign that we're in the middle of, working very closely with our partners, the big fire service organizations. We're wanting to continue to do that as well, and actually working directly with fire departments. We've got a group of contractors who are reaching out to fire departments across the country, working directly with them, providing support. That's going really, really well. So we'll continue to do that. I also just want to mention, because you were talking about the state competition, we also have a interactive dashboard of the United States. So it shows all the participants across the United States, state by state.
Hmm.
And you can kind of see how your state is comparing to others. Right now, we have 5 states with over 1,000 participants. So if your state's not quite there yet, um, you know, please encourage your leadership and fire chiefs and everybody else in your state that let's drive up those numbers. I mean, if you think about it, if we can get every state in the United States to have 1,000 firefighters, that's 50,000 firefighters right there.
Yep. Yeah.
And I actually think it's doable to do
I
that.
do too. I think programs, hopefully, again, people are and if they just are joining us, where do we want them to go? Again, what's the website address?
So nfr.cdc.gov will take you to the enrollment website. And from there, if you want more information, you can click more information, and that'll take you to the more informative website that has the dashboard and all those kind of features.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, it's not that difficult. I if somebody started at the beginning of this podcast, they're probably done by now and they're back listening 100%. But we know that firefighters, we like to multitask. So please, as you're listening, join and at least get your stuff, your registry created, like your account started. And again, this is such a vital. This is really vital information, and I'm glad we're having this discussion because there's always these questions. Well, we tackled sharing information. No, it's already information that the states are sharing. We're just tying it to firefighting. Time. It doesn't take that long. At least get registered, and then you can go back and answer the questions. You can do it while you're, sitting at the coffee table in the morning as a crew. Try to get your whole department. You can actually get recognized there. And we know that cancer is such an issue. It's going to continually be an issue as we're exposed to more and more carcinogens. And the research that you have going on with the registry, are there any other projects that you guys are tied to or that you are doing currently on the cancer side?
Yeah, so NIOSH has a long history of working with the fire service and doing the kind of research that we talked about at the beginning. So we're still doing a lot of our exposure monitoring research of firefighters. We have a project right now. Actually, you mentioned the lithium-ion batteries,
Hmm.
electric vehicles. So we're working closely with Underwriters Laboratories on that project, but wanting to better understand the chemical exposures that come from those types of fires. And as you can imagine, a lot more, metals, heavy metals that are involved in those kinds of fires. They're also much longer lasting, harder to suppress.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a big project looking at that. And then, just working closely with our partners and in other ways, looking at PP. We've got, the National Personal Protective Technology Laboratory at NIOSH that has done tons of research on firefighter PPE. So they're going to continue to do that work. We do fatality investigations at NIOSH.
Yep.
So we're going to continue to do all that mission work that's vitally important for the fire service, and as we learn, share the information back with the fire service. I think that's one thing that NIOSH actually does a really good job is basically the idea of taking research and translating it into practice and disseminating it to the decision makers back to the fire service. It doesn't mean anything. You can do the best research project in the world, but if you're not sharing the information to the people that can actually use it and do something with it, it doesn't mean anything. So that's really the key is we've got to be working closely with the fire service so that they can take what we learn and do something positive with it.
Yeah. We also have to act and listen, right? We had mentioned some of the things earlier that, with PPE, we have to use it properly. We have to keep it, um, yeah, and maintain it and clean it. And it's a great way to kind of segue into, based off all your research, what are a couple, like maybe your three top things that every firefighter needs to be doing and paying attention when it comes to cancer?
Um, you know, take care of yourself. So, the chemical exposures, absolutely, that's part of it. Like you said, you really want to do everything you can to lessen your exposures. And so I'll talk about that first, but I'll come back to like take care of yourself. But
Okay,
in terms of lessening your exposures, you got to wear your
cool.
SCBA.
Yeah. So
Wear your
number
SCBA.
two, limit your
Yeah.
exposure wherever possible, right? Number one, take care
Yes.
of yourself. Number two,
Yes.
limit exposure. All right.
Correct.
I cut
Yep.
you off there. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. Yeah, so wear your SCBA, keep your gear clean. After firefighting operations, uh, clean your skin, decontaminate, get showered up as soon as you can, um, and then going back to protect, taking care of yourself. You got to eat well, you got to exercise, you got to sleep well, and
Mhm.
we know those are factors that if you don't do those things, it does increase your risk of cancer, and we know that across the board, whether you're a firefighter or not. So that's really really critical. Take care of yourself, lessen your exposures, and then after that, I mean, I don't know what the third one is. Sign up for the
Register.
NFR.
Exactly. Yes. Register via the National Firefighter Cancer Registry. Like, give back to the fire service so we can really help the next generation and the current generations understand what's going on. So
Yep.
right. You had mentioned take care of yourself, and does NIOSH get into some of the health and sleep and fitness related studies? Are they starting to dabble in that more, or is it mainly just exposure stuff right now?
At least like within my program, it's more focused on the chemical exposures, but we do have research at NIOSH that looks in general within the workforce, not just firefighters, that does consider those other factors like
Yeah.
sleep quality and nutrition and total worker health. That's a big area of research here at NIOSH. I think we could do a lot more in that area within the fire service. And I know there are programs and probably people you've talked to before, researchers that are looking at that, like Dr. Burgess and
Yep.
Sarah Janke and Alberta Kaman Martinez. So, we've worked a lot with those academic researchers in the past, and we'll continue to do so and support them where we can.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said it's funny. They said, the people that research health and wellness, they say limit your exposure and then take care of yourself, right? Like, and it's funny. The guy who researches on the exposure says take care of yourself and limit your exposure. They say you guys are talking the same language, which is again the really why you started working on the cancer registry, is to just get more data for all of these things. And again, our number we want after this podcast to be up to 30,000 registries. How cool would that be?
That
I
would
mean,
be awesome.
I don't know how much pull we have. I At one point it was just Janelle's mom and my mom listening, but that was a couple years ago. So hopefully, I like to call us the misfits, the people that listen to this who are trying to just improve themselves in the fire service. This is a really easy way. Again, I've emphasized that a couple of times, but I also hope that then somebody can take these lessons and the information that you've given us and pass that on. We tackled quite a few things from, obviously the cancer risks to why this even got started. Uh, Three great things about what each person can do, to limit their own risks of it. But let's look at the fire service. Let's take a bigger picture. And you, as a research looking in at the fire service, what are some of the biggest things that we can do as an industry to help combat cancer and to limit our risks?
I think the fire service has a unique opportunity to really support each other and hold each other accountable. It's one of the few professions out there where, you really, especially for career firefighters. I mean, you're eating together, you work together, you train together,
Hmm.
you exercise together, hopefully, and so you actually do have, there's positive peer pressure there. I think you can actually make a difference, not just for yourself, but for your brothers and sisters in the fire service. A lot of it is, I mean, it's not rocket science, right?
Right?
We got to eat healthier. We got to exercise. Let's try to get some rest when we can. And I know that's hard with the shift schedules and everything. Um, the wearing your SCBA. If you see somebody and they're in a smoky environment and they don't have their SCBA on, say something.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that comes down to leadership too. Leadership's really important, the officer level. But I just think the fire service, you guys can really hold each other accountable and make a difference. And again, if the fire service starts doing that and we're capturing that information and documenting it through the NFR, I mean, it's not just like, let's find out everything that's bad about the fire service, like cancer's a horrible illness, horrible. It's an awful diagnosis to have. Our goal, what we really want to do is prevent it. And
Hmm.
so if we can see that like some of the positive things that are happening in the fire service are actually helping to lower the risk of of cancer, that's huge. That's incredibly powerful information that we can then implement more broadly across the
Yeah.
fire service.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, right. Like, there's a lot of potential for really positive things to come out of this, but we all have to stand up. We all have to do our part. And I go back, I mentioned brother and sisterhood. Like, I think, I'm glad you mentioned that because, right. Like, of course there's going to be the ribbing and the, some of the joshing that goes back and forth, which I love. I think we all like that kind of, family atmosphere, but we can also build each other up. And, like you're saying, working out a little bit more together, eat a little healthier together, and then of course encourage people to always be wearing their SCBA. Is there any reason to take your SCBA off on a fire ground now? I mean, based off of what you're seeing, like even making it all the way back to the rig, right? There's chemicals everywhere around those.
Yeah, I mean, if you can smell it, then you should be wearing your SCBA. I would say,
Hmm.
Um, the other piece of it is the dermal exposure. So we've just touched on that a little bit, but
Yeah.
after firefighting, get yourself cleaned up as quickly as possible. I've done a lot of work with Dr. Gavin Horn,
Yep.
and he always talks about like the fire service pays more attention to putting their rig back in the service than they do putting themselves back in the service. And after a fire response, like we've got to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, and getting cleaned up and getting rest and hydration and putting clean clothes on, all those
Hmm.
kinds of things. So
Yeah.
that's also part of it.
And cleaning our gear, right? Getting our
Yep.
gear back in that bag so it's not creating even more exposure as we're driving back. Put it
Yep.
in a bag, get back, shower, get yourself some clean clothes, and then work on getting your rig back into
Yep.
service, right? Like, and I
Yep.
think when we first started talking about cancer, it was kind of, well, we got to get a rig back in service, and then maybe we'll do our reports, and then we'll get. But um, just to confirm, the research is showing that stuff is on you and around you, and you're spreading it to other places. So make sure you get yourself clean and take care of yourself before your rig. then get back into service, make sure everything stays clean. And to me, that's about being a good crew member too, a good crew and good teammate, right? You're not
Yeah.
exposing the next crew to this stuff as well. And then, going back to some more personal things, what's the biggest challenge for you? Not only with this program, but just like as you're doing research for the fire service, for you personally, how do you just continually try to maintain momentum?
For this program, the challenge that we're facing is just misunderstanding, not really getting what it is or why it's important. Hesitant to provide personal information, worried about data security and privacy and all those kinds of things, which I get. I do understand that. I want to let your listeners know that we've done everything that we possibly can to make it as secure as possible, to make it as confidential as possible. We have the highest level of what's called an assurance of confidentiality, which basically means your information is protected from release, even under court order. We're never going to share your identity or identifiable information with anybody. Um, so that's part of it with the NFR, just kind of, addressing some of those misunderstandings about it. Um, and then, just working in the government, there's a lot of hoops you got to jump
Yeah.
through to get something stood up. It took us a long time to get it stood up in the first place. Part of that was because of the data security elements that we had to meet, but we're gonna power through. I mean, we powered through. We had all these technical issues today. We
That's
powered
right.
through.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
we're not going to give up. We're going to work our butts off no matter what. The mission of the NFR is just too important. So, we're going to make sure that we fulfill that mission and that we're successful.
Yeah. And right, you said it doesn't matter. We're going to overcome the challenge together, and that's really why we need people to step up and register for this. So it comes to our, the final question, Doc. I mean, what are you doing personally to get better?
Um, Focusing on what you can control. There's a lot of things that, like it or not, are outside of our control. But there's a lot that we can control. I think, I mean, that certainly applies within the program that I'm leading.
Yeah. And the
But I
current
think it,
environment, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? There's some things that are a little stressful, but you got to keep your eye on that, what you can
right,
control, right?
right, and I think it applies to how you take care of yourself in the fire service and lessen your exposures and sign up for the NFR. I mean, those are all things that you can control as an individual. Um, you know, Unfortunately, cancer is a very common disease in the United States or really globally. Um, we can't always control. Sometimes you just, unfortunately, you're dealt a bad hand in
Mhm.
life. But where we can control it, we should do whatever we can to try to reduce that risk. And I strongly encourage your listeners, do everything you can. You're the most important resource in the fire service. You're one of the most important resources in your communities. You're more important than the rig, right? We were talking
Right.
about putting the firefighter back into service. Like, we need you to take care of yourself. Your community needs you to take care of yourself. Your family needs you to take care of yourself. Um, so do that. You have control over it, and as you have time, please sign up for the NFR.
Yeah. Please do that. And when you do those things and follow those things, you will be helping the fire service. You will be really helping yourself be better, right? And the emphasis on being better is about learning something. It's about doing something and sharing something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thanks for listening, everybody.